Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 240. I hope you've all had an amazing weekend, and I'm sure after reading the title of this Red Pill that you know I got something special cooked up for you here today. And since we have a lot to cover, I don't want to take up any more time in the intro. Let's get straight into it, but quickly before we get started, make sure to get relaxed, get comfortable, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or maybe a glass of wine or beer or any beverage of your choice if it's getting a little later out there in the Matrix. And also make sure to please comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill podcast. But please, before you leave a comment, just make sure that you used the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered the project in at least 3 months. So in the event that it's been over 3 months since I reviewed that altcoin, or if I've never reviewed that coin before, as long as it has at least 1 year of chart history here on TradingView, you can go ahead and comment below with the name of the altcoin and include the ticker symbol next to it as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes, those top 4 will be selected for next week's Red Pill podcast. So many supporters here have been reaching out to me, requesting me to look further into this government shutdown that's still ongoing. So I took a couple moments to quickly look into the situation, and I found some real juicy gems almost right away. So I decided to dive deeper and realized that it was worth decoding. And here we are. So I want to kick off today's Red Pill podcast with a quick decode of this government shutdown that's on its 33rd day. Funny enough, the master number 33 right there in our faces. And as of today, this government shutdown is officially 2 times longer than the second longest government shutdown where all agencies were affected. And guess when that was? 2013. That would be the last year of the snake, as you can see right here. So for those that are new here, first off, welcome to the wolfpack. And just so you're aware, we're currently in the year of the snake. So back then, 2013, during the year of the snake, all agencies were affected by that government shutdown that lasted about 16 days during the Obama administration. Now, before we go back in time, let's catch everyone up to speed on what this current government shutdown is all about. And bear with me because this is the boring stuff, but I want to quickly read through this top paragraph over here, where it says on October 1st, 2025, the federal government of the United States began a shutdown at midnight as a result of congressional failure to pass appropriations legislation for the 2026 fiscal year, which began that day. The shutdown resulted from partisan disagreements over federal spending levels, foreign and boring, but we do want to visit this in a moment. The background, it will be important, but just so you're aware, we got the boring stuff out of the way. Now let's keep going. Now, what's most interesting for me, of course, is always the dates. So we have October 1st, and as you can see, the shutdown started on that day. And guess when the government shut down back in 2013? That's also right. It started on October 1st. And this is where things start to get pretty interesting. So for those who are wondering, I looked through the dates of every government shutdown on this list over here. There's about 11 of them, and only 2 out of the 11 of them started on October 1st. And it's the 2 that we're talking about here. So now you can see why I started to entertain diving deeper into this, because we have the 2 longest government shutdowns that affected all agencies, both happening during the year of the snake, and both of them starting on the same exact date, October 1st. Now, let me quickly read through the top paragraph under that second section that I mentioned a moment ago, right over here. And it says Article 1 of the United States Constitution vests the U.S. Congress with the authority to appropriate funds drawn from the Treasury. And then it says since 1977, the federal budget process has used a fiscal year that runs from October 1st to September 30th of the following year. So I'll end that there. That could be the quote unquote reason why the shutdown is starting on this date. But I do find it very fascinating that out of all 11 of the shutdowns, only 2 of them started on this particular date. And those 2 are tied together, as I just showed you moments ago. And now I'm going to show you how they're even more tied together with this year, 1977. So I started to just look back. Who was the president in 1977? And it was Jimmy Carter. And guess when his birthday was? That's right, it's October 1st. And 1977, the year that he became president, was the year of the snake. How insane is that? So now that we can clearly see a theme here, we're only 5 minutes into today's podcast. It's a pretty powerful start, I'd say. Let's quickly review the longest government shutdown that technically did not affect all agencies, and it was the one back in 2018 into 2019. And this would be the one that happened for 35 days, which we're pushing up towards pretty soon, this upcoming week. This was also under the Trump administration in his first term. So this upcoming Wednesday, since we're on day 33, this upcoming Wednesday, November 5th, will actually mark not only the 1-year anniversary of Trump's selection victory against Kamala Harris, but it will also be the longest government shutdown of all time, no matter how you measure it. Again, the one in the Obama administration back in 2013, it affected all agencies, and that's why I'm just quickly calling it the longest to affect all agencies up until the recent one we have, of course, which is now 2 times longer. The last Trump term also had a pretty lengthy government shutdown, as you could see, 35 days, and that would make this upcoming Wednesday the longest shutdown ever for the US government. What's also fascinating about this is that would mark 36 days, and for the decoders here, you know the number 36 esoterically is 3 sixes, 666, the number of carbon, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons, the number of this matrix, the physical realm that we're experiencing here as spiritual beings. This is the number of man. It's not the number of the beast or the number of evil, or none of that. It's the number of man. It's the number of the matrix. And the apex predator loves to ritualize this particular number 36, as it's again concealing that code of the 666, which becomes 18. And in Judaism, 18 is one of their most important numbers. But let's stay on track here. The point that I'm making is I find it very interesting how if this were to be the longest government shutdown, it would be on that 36th day, the 36s. Apex Predator loves to ritualize this. So keep that in mind for this upcoming Wednesday, November 5th. As I told you a moment ago, that will also be the anniversary of Trump's election victory, which might matter. It's not, of course, the most important thing to say, but it is, of course, a big theme here in cryptocurrency and for us investors, because it was ever since that day that the market kind of really woke up, and showed us that we could have euphoria again in crypto. And generally, since he's been president, we've seen new all-time highs across the board in pretty much all the top assets regarding major indices. Of course, lately we've had gold quite euphoric. Bitcoin, of course, has made new all-time high after new all-time high after new all-time high. We've seen Ethereum recently slightly tap on new all-time highs. We've seen Binance Coin hit a new all-time high. You get where I'm going with this. So this has been a very interesting time to be aware, because whilst people are getting laid off and the economy is quite, let's just say, shitty, we're also seeing pretty amazing market performance, except for the really speculative stuff that, of course, we're seeing in the crypto market. Most of the altcoins are just starting to one by one wake up. And you guys have been seeing this lately yourselves, where we're getting like one random coin popping off out of nowhere. It could be a coin that dates all the way back to 2014, 2015, like we're seeing today with Digibyte and Dash. It's quite random, right? So privacy coins recently doing really well. This is kind of how the end of the cycle goes. So again, we had euphoria in stocks, euphoria push over into gold, and then I think we're in the tail end of the transition of sentiment into euphoria for crypto again, but we'll get to that in a moment. This decode here, I think, is going to help us really break down piece by piece what we're coming up against in the month of November. If anything, this could just be called November Decoded, because I've done so much already decoding this month of November. With having the day that leaves 47 days left in the year. We also have the 47th week of the year. We also have this final 3 weeks of Saturn retrograde. We have the final Mercury retrograde of the year coming up soon. I will talk about that in a moment. We have so much going on for this month of November. And then, of course, we have in our last cycle 4 years ago, November marked the top for Bitcoin. So it's a very fascinating time to be aware and to be focused in this market. And I think we're coming up to some really pivotal dates energetically that will sort of push the quote unquote speculative assets here in crypto land and make market participants want to speculate on them again. Kind of the way that the risk curve operates. Now, let's get back to this. I just want you to keep in mind regarding this upcoming November 5th, because we will be now in the longest government shutdown ever, especially because this will be during the 45th week of the year. Keep that in mind, starting tomorrow, the 45th week of the year, because Trump's first presidency made him the 45th president. You've seen this many times where he uses the number 45 next to the number 47. And you have 4 plus 5 equals 9, and 4 plus 7 equals 11. There's your 911 code, your 119 code, which we have. This is the 119th Congress dealing with this shutdown. So I do think these things that occurred in his last presidency are worth bringing up here today, especially because anybody who studies politics and markets, you know that Trump did this tariff shit in the last presidency also. And then that led to having a very euphoric kind of blow off top moment for the crypto market. It feels like we're there again. Now, to top this all off regarding November 5th, the fact that it's in the 45th week of the year, Trump's first presidency was the 45th president. November 5th is also going to be a full moon, as you can see right there. So it will also be a full supermoon in Taurus. Taurus is symbolic of the bull and also the cerebellum associated with movement. Also, another thing to keep in mind for this week ahead is the upcoming Friday, the 7th. The reason I'm bringing this up is because it returns back to this 97 code that we've been keeping an eye on this year. Let me get back to that date. Apologies. Here you're going to see on the right, we have April 7th. You all know this was the date that we had a major market bottom after a crash, all tied to the World War tariff. So I'm going to break this down piece by piece for those who are new here. This upcoming Friday, the 7th, does conceal some code that we got from this April 7th date. We have this being the 97th day of the year, and then also we are in the year of the snake, which is the serpent. You have your 97 code right there. We all remember the entire market crashed into the date of April 7th. That was the 97th day of the year. And the month of November starts with the prefix novem, which in Latin is the number 9. So you have the true 9th month for Novem and 7th day. That's your 97 code again, tied to the gematria of serpent, the year that we're in. And perhaps some of you remember Trump reading the snake poem during his first term. Very cryptic. Also bring back in something I brought up last week regarding the number 47. Since Trump is the 47th president and the entire market crashed this year into the date April 7th, the 4/7 date, Well, tomorrow, November 3rd, tied to April 7th, the 4/7 date, is 211 days. Some of you probably remember the significance of the number 211 because it's the 47th prime number. So we have the 4/7 crash day, bottom, pivot. It was the best opportunity. And then here we have November 3rd. Very, very interesting how it's tied to this 47 code in a very hidden way and not so obvious way. So just keep that in mind as well regarding like a pivot of energy and also the fact that we still have this ongoing government shutdown. Then also, if you don't include the end date, it's tied to this upcoming Tuesday. It's fair to play it this way. Again, these are kind of small little changes. And for those people over there in Australia, you're already kind of used to being a day ahead. So bear with me here, but this is the kind of decoding you need to do. You need to be open to at least a 3-day window because everything works in threes. You have the day of, the day before, the day after, right? You usually hear this with the eve of a date, right? And then anytime you move after, it's now kind of like a new system, a genesis or reset, right? That's just some decoding wisdom on the side. Getting back to this and this connection to 211, 47th prime, we have the 4/7 date. And this upcoming Tuesday, it will tie to the current government shutdown as being the 35th day of our shutdown. That would make it tied for the longest, coming back to the one of Trump's first term. So what this sounds like, man, is it's an identical term in a way. Very, very similar. It's like it's happening, though, in a mirrored fashion, where at the end of Trump's first term, he had the C-19 moment, the market crashed. Here at the beginning of his second term, the market crashed pretty much the same time of year. The market has also reacted in an identical fashion as well. And we'll also recap that a little bit later. But then we're also seeing this government shutdown as the almost identical amount of time. Like, I mean, it wasn't like 5 days, it wasn't 20 days. And I doubt it's going to be 50 days or like 60 days. I'm pretty sure it's going to be super similar to his last term. I wouldn't even be shocked if it's only 35 days or if they flex and they push it to the 36th day. That wouldn't shock me. It's feeling so similar the way these 2 years are operating with the same guy and how much prana he is getting whilst being, this in this position. So one other thing also that I'm thinking is pretty important to mention is the connection to this number 35, because 35 esoterically becomes 3 5s, 5, 5, 5. 5 plus 5 plus 5 becomes 15. And the number 47 is the 15th prime number. This is very important to be aware of because April 7th, the date that the entire market crashed into, was the 15th week of the year. And not just the 15th, it's the start of the 15th week of the year. The market bottoms and then pivots and has a V-shaped recovery from that exact day. Again, the number 47 is the 15th prime number. This is why I'm trying to just find a little bit more that brings this all together full circle. Again, we're keeping it in the context of Trump, the important dates tied to Trump, and the current government shutdown. We're not trying to stray too far away from that. All right. One other thing that's going a little deeper regarding like looking at numbers esoterically is the 35 days being 5 weeks. And that is also, it could be perceived as, let me show you, we're here. It says 4 weeks and 6 days. So that means naturally 5 weeks can be perceived as 4 weeks and 7 days. The 47 code. Also, Trump, the 47th president, won the selection on November 5th of last year. That also had a 15 standard date numerology. Again, 47 became 47th president, 15th prime number. So pretty much all of this ties directly back to Trump, him winning the president. I mean, I'll take it even further, okay? Let me show you how deep this goes. Just look at Trump's birthday. So we're going to put in the birthday of June 15th. of this year. 14th, apologies. As mentioned earlier, if the month November starts with novem, the prefix novem in Latin being 9, just like October starts with the prefix octo, octagon, 8 sides, right? So October should be the 8th month. Well, December starts with deci. Deci in Latin is 10. Then January for Janus, you have 2 faces, 2 towers. That's 1 and 1. That becomes 11. February, Februus, that's 12. And then the system of 12s associated with the sun makes March the first month in the system. So we have 13 full moons. We have 12 tied to the sun. It's a little deeper, but you'll understand that the true first month in the system, according to the numbers, would be March, New Year's for the Northern Hemisphere, and then the opposite for those of you over in Australia land. So we have March as the first, April as the second, May as the third, and then June as the fourth. You could be simple and just subtract 2, right? You have November 11 minus 2, you have 9, right? So we have 6 minus 2 is 4. Well, that would make Trump's birthday the 4th month, 14 day. Written international, you have the 144 code. And then you take this over to the day that he would have won the election, and you have your 144 code. Again, 1st year anniversary since becoming president again. Pretty incredible how this is all tied in, even in the esoteric system. So you have your 144. A lot of people look at this as a spiritual number or whatever. In my opinion, numbers aren't really spiritual. Numbers are created by the mind of man. So numbers are just a way of explaining things. It's a way of applying logic. Doesn't mean anything more than that. When I think like truly spiritual, I think nothingness. I think void. I think, yeah. So that's the point of the matrix, of being here in a physical body. We have a central nervous system. We get to come up with shit. We get to make shit up. We get to make up numbers. We get to name everything, and we get to build and destroy everything, and then our egos kind of prove this, right? Anyways, coming back to the point here about the 144 code and the 144 code for Trump's birthday, perhaps why he was chosen, to be the guy in this Aquarian transition that we're all moving through. And the fact that it would be 144 days apart, leading up to what would be the longest government shutdown. And we were just talking about all these other connections. So I'm going to skip on. I think you guys get the point here with the power of this upcoming week and these particular dates. So we have, I'm just going to say it like this. I personally feel, with all things considered, that we're about to experience like a trinity of energy between the 3 dates of tomorrow, being November 3rd, November 4th, and November 5th, with that being the 1-year anniversary of Trump's landslide victory over Kamala. And unless the government shutdown ends by Tuesday, extending it into Wednesday, the 5th would make it the longest government shutdown in any way you slice it. That would be the 36th day in total, and there's your 6 code, 666. Now, this might be going the extra mile, but I couldn't help myself thinking about Jimmy Carter and the connection that I made earlier with him becoming the president in 1977 during the Year of the Snake, and how his birthday was October 1st, and the 2 snake year government shutdowns, 2013 and this year, 2025, both started on October 1st. So then, randomly, I remembered Jimmy Carter died last year. He had a funeral in January of this year. So I started to think like, oh, there's something here. So I remembered Carter's funeral, which was at the that was at the beginning of this year. Right after Trump won the selection, Carter passed on. You could see his date right there, December 29, 2024. Again, Trump won the election on the 5th of November. So I remember the footage circulating from Carter's funeral with like Obama cackling at Trump several times, making jokes, and George W. Bush, like was given Obama like tummy bumps instead of a handshake, like they were at a fucking baseball game or something. It was wild. It was literally crazy to see on camera. They weren't hiding anything. These guys act like they hate each other on Twitter, but then they're like all playing golf together, hanging out, right? Anyways, earlier I told you about the connection with November 7th, this upcoming Friday. And the reason why it's a little bit more esoteric, but it's because Novem is 9797. Serpent in Gematria equals 97. The market crashed into the 97th day of the year. So that's why this date popped out to me. And then I saw how November 7th is actually the day leaving 54 days left in the year. So when you take from Trump's selection victory on November 5th of last year to Carter's death day, they are 54 days apart. So that's sort of interesting, right? Not too crazy. Well, what's even more interesting is that when you take from Trump's selection victory on November 5th over to Jimmy Carter's funeral on the 9th of January of 2025, it ends up becoming 65 days. So what's really fascinating about this is you have the mirror numbers working here. So we have from the 56th day, 65 days later is this funeral, as above, so below. So to me, this feels like it's all super tied together regarding Carter, what happened in 1977. I know the market looked like shit in 1977, so that's like a side part to this, but there's totally different realities in 1977 compared to today. And this is why even entertaining the 2013 market is probably a good place to stop when it comes to looking further back into the past, because at least in 2013, we had Bitcoin trading actively on the market. We also had XRP and a handful of other altcoins. So I'm not going to go diving into 1977 or anything further. I do really like how the 2013 year had the same exact date that the government shutdown started on, with two completely separate presidents, and then it's all tying back to this 1977 year, also the year of the snake. I'm feeling like 2013 has something to reveal to us, and you're going to see more why in a moment. So it's clearly all tied together. The second longest government shutdown that affected all agencies was back in 2013 during Obama's administration, and they were sitting next to each other at Jimmy Carter's funeral, the guy who became the president in 1977. All three of those presidents tied to the year of the snake, and there's actually a fourth president involved in this, tied to the year of the snake, and it would be George W. Bush, who also sat next to them. How unbelievable. And this, okay, I don't want to go too far, but let's stay on track here. During the Los Angeles fires at the start of the year, that was when that funeral was happening. And that was, in my opinion, to cap off the Year of the Dragon with a fire ritual. We have Jimmy Carter's funeral happening at the same exact time, and the orchestrated event was the orchestrated event of that fire ritual in LA was to roll out the carpet for big changes coming to Los Angeles in preparation for the next Summer Olympics, transitioning LA into like what we could call a smart city. And I do believe the LA Dodgers just won the World Series. So there you go. Another LA tie-in to all of this. So there's clearly a theme in the sports world right now with LA. But getting back to the Summer Olympics in Los Angeles, that'll be in 2013. In 2028, apologies, and Trump will still be president then, unless he gets taken out, which I doubt, because my truth is that he's the perfect confidence man to have in power during this reset. And that reset, in my opinion, has everything to do with 2028 through 2029, because that will be the next Shemitah year from late September 2028 through early September 2029. This is when I expect the quote unquote real chaos that many decoders are predicting to happen much sooner. I think we still have some time. I think we even have another major market melt up into 2028, 2029 as well. I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case either. Kind of like the 100-year anniversary leading into the Great Depression, 1929, where that started. Which is interesting that that was also the year of the snake. But what I'll reveal to you to wrap this all up is the connection from the start of the Shemitah, measuring from the last day of Rosh Hashanah on September 22nd of 2028, not including the end date, until Trump's official last day in office, which will be January 19th in 2029. And you're going to see the code right there, and I hinted at it a little bit earlier. These are 119 days apart. And in the Gregorian system, you of course have January 19th would be written 119. Your 119 code twice. And this government shutdown we have right now is under the 119th Congress. And this, of course, is your 9/11 code. Remember, the 9/11 ritual in New York City happened during the year of the snake in 2001. All three presidents, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, and George W. Bush, were all sitting next to each other in a row at Jimmy Carter's funeral. That's your trinity. George W. Bush with the 9/11 ritual in the year of the snake in 2001, a Shemitah year. The liberal confidence man, Barack Obama, with his trusty sidekick, Michael, taking office in 2009, immediately following the start of the subprime crisis, the housing market crisis in 2008, a Shemitah year. And of course, he was also president during the government shutdown in 2013, during the year of the snake, as we were talking about earlier. And now we have Donald Trump, what some are calling the quote unquote crypto president here in 2025, the year of the snake. And he was also president during the pre-Shemitah year ritual of C19 in 2020, ending his first term with a black swan event that crashed the markets. And then he became president again, but this time starting his second term with a black swan event and a market crash. As above, so below. And he'll be president all the way until the next Shemitah year, which, as I mentioned earlier, will be from September 2028 until September 2029. And I believe the symbolism of what's to come in the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030 era will be revealed to us in the opening ceremony of the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. So now that we've covered this all thoroughly, we know we have a big week ahead tied to the significant numbers and dates that have been the topic of discussion for us all year here since I released my Year of the Snake Decoded in January, and even more significant since the April crash into April 7th, the 4/7 date, with the 47 code tied to Trump, the 47th president. And I believe this number will continue to impact us here, specifically until Chinese New Year, because remember, the last day of the Year of the Snake. Let me quickly get to that. Will be February 16th, and February 16th is the 47th day of next year. February 16th also happens to be an annular solar eclipse. Now, let's pivot over to the charts because I feel it's worth checking in on how the 2013 snake year government shutdown affected the markets, and we're going to be focusing on the S&P 500. So let me quickly open this up over here. Then go back to 2013. All right. Let me mark this off. And it ended on the 17th. So there's our window of time during that government shutdown. And interestingly enough, so far, October 17th this year was the lowest that Bitcoin traded recently, and that date it swiped down to like 103K, just so you're aware. But anyways, what you'll see in the S&P chart after October 1st is there was a notable correction into October 9th. Just a day off from the recent crypto liquidation ritual that we all experienced here on October 10th. So that's really fascinating as well, considering this tie to the same year that we're in, year of the snake. Also both in a government shutdown at the same exact time. But then when we look from October 9th up till around October 14th, there was a recovery, and then the day before the government reopened, there was pretty much like a full recovery, and then on the day of the government reopening, and not only was there a full recovery, but there was actually the S&P started pushing higher, venturing even deeper into price discovery. So now let's check in on what Bitcoin was up to during the government shutdown in 2013. We're going to go over to this chart over here. Get a nice simple chart, nothing too crazy going on. And here we are in October. I'm going to quickly mark this stuff off. Oh, this is 2012. Apologies. This microphone is kind of covering up my view. I'm trying my best here. I'm sure you guys appreciate it. There you got October 1st. You could see that immediately followed with a crash. Got October 17th. I'm going to zoom in. Massive. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but that was a 25% correction in the month of October. We did pretty much hold up sideways, and then after the government shutdown was over, you see what happened next. So it's a similar effect. We have a clear liquidation ritual happening during the government shutdown, followed by sideways, and then the days leading up to the government shutdown concluding. I assume there was news or rumors of the government reopening, so naturally speculators are trying to front run, and we can see the from the moment that the government reopened, there was a quick rally, but this actually followed by, believe it or not, another liquidation ritual of almost 25% for Bitcoin. Like, if we got a 25% correction right now, it would be pretty wild. I mean, what's the recent correction full amount for Bitcoin? 18%. And it's like the end of the fucking world for everybody, right? So this is really interesting to think about. 25% correction back then would be similar to us having like a 40% correction today. Like, that's how brutal it would be, right? So, and then again, for us to have like a 12 or maybe 15 to 18% correction would be similar to like much more brutal. Anyways, you guys get the point here. It's a much different market today, obviously, but at least we can look back at what Bitcoin was doing in 2013, and that's really cool that we have that. And we don't really have that with many other projects here in the crypto space. So the point that I was making was that typically when we start getting the news floating around and rumors that something's going to occur, there's going to be front running. Probably this whole thing was a trap, getting people in this quick rally and then another liquidation event, another sideways, but then continuation. So that's actually pretty typical in these situations. And with that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if something similar happened this time around with the government shutdown ending soon, likely this week, and then we have a quick euphoric rally immediately following it, followed by a quick wipeout of all the leverage. Probably not as bad as it was on October 10th, but you get my point. And then perhaps around the next Fed minutes on November 19th, there will be more clarity on the December FOMC, and them hinting at a higher chance of a rate cut in December, for example, in the December meeting, which will be, December 9th, I believe. Now, that would definitely be a confidence rally from the Fed spellcasters, and then we finish off the month of November strong, similar to the past 2 years with regards to November performance. But it does very much feel like all the patterns that have been usually operating, no matter how you look at them, have just been turned upside down. So it's very, very difficult right now to entertain past performance and things like seasonality. I mean, it's just getting unbelievably complicated. And that right there is one of the signs of actually a bear market. And I hate to say it, but whenever you have very positive shit kind of all colliding together at once, but you're not getting positive price action, it's usually the sign that things are not going to continue to look good, at least not for the long term. So we're in that weird environment where like the slightest bad news just absolutely demolishes altcoins, and then the best news doesn't do shit to them. But then we also see Bitcoin dominance kind of hanging out in the 60% territory, and it has yet to fall down any deeper. And we have seen Bitcoin in price discovery for like a year now, and we have really not seen price discovery in the top altcoins this year. So that's very different. That's something we've never seen before. And what that means is the concept of a quote unquote extended cycle is not far-fetched. It's not weird for us to entertain a Q1 2026 peak, kind of similar to how we had in 2021. An amazing move up for Bitcoin, even into March, even into April. That was about as good as it got. But most of the movement that the alts made was from December through March, April. Could that be the case for us this time around? Well, the way the eclipses are postured, it's making more sense than it isn't. So let's continue with this. But so far, this is very similar to what happened in 2020 post C19 crash, which so far has a very similar structure to what we're seeing here in 2025 after World War tariff. And I showed you this last week. I even included the way including the way the gold chart is moving right now is very similar to 2020. And then we know 2025 is similar to 2013 with regards to this government shutdown and the fact that they're both in the year of the snake and starting on the same exact day. And let me quickly show you how XRP traded back in 2013 through the same month of October, again during that government shutdown, since this was actually one of the few altcoins that was trading back then. So you have here is September, and here you have the beginning of November. So all of October for XRP in 2013 was down. And I'm only showing you this not to compare to XRP's price action today, but more so to show you how a top altcoin traded back then while Bitcoin was holding strong. Again, Bitcoin wasn't doing this. It wasn't looking like a 60% correction. It had two really quick 25% corrections that were immediately bought back up. But it didn't have this arduous sell-off that just kept going and going and going for the entire month of October. It was stable. It actually was going up into the end of October, and October 2013 ended very strong for Bitcoin. So again, Bitcoin was very dominant still in this same position. So again, there aren't too many examples I could show you here for altcoins trading back in 2013. Most of the OG coins actually launched in 2014 at the end of that cycle for Bitcoin. Similar to what happened in the end of the last cycle in 2020 into 2021 with all that, the DeFi and the NFT garbage that started to flood the space. It was all launched at the very end of Bitcoin's cycle in late 2020 into 2021. And I guess in a way it's fair to say that we did have something similar at the end of 2024 with all the shit coins being launched on the Solana blockchain. We can't deny that. It's also fair to say that was truly the last time that the entire crypto asset class was euphoric, which is crazy to say because that was literally a year ago now. It's crazy how time flies, which I'm sure many of you remember. What kicked off that euphoria was the selection results coming in and the FOMC happening at the same time. Definitely, in my opinion, motivated that. So now with the way the recent FOMC went, which by the way, let me be very clear, my truth on why we broke out in November 2024 is because of the eclipses. it's because of the eclipse. It was not the FOMC or the none of that bullshit. They just give us a reason for us to like tie on to the, but you guys know this by now. I always say that what actually runs this market is gematria, numerology, and astrology. They give up this exoteric stuff to make you believe what they want you to believe, whether it's to make you depressed and sad and anxious at a certain time or to be happy and excited and euphoric at a certain time. They're pretty much weaponizing it against us. So keep that in mind. So now with the way that the recent FOMC meeting went, it all felt like a big fake out and the Fed's kind of trying to act tough. So from an exoteric perspective, it makes November feel uncertain. But remember, at the very start of November last year, the market also shared that uncertainty waiting for the US election results. And that was also the case back in 2020 in the prior election. So this is definitely something on my radar here in November 2025, especially with how poor the sentiment has been in crypto lately. And typically, the Bitcoin cycle ends in euphoria after gold makes a run, and then when gold starts consolidating, we see the Bitcoin hype followed by a breakdown in Bitcoin dominance, and then that's when alts start to run. And so far, with Bitcoin dominance recently moving up pretty much day after day for the past 50 days or so. You can see right here. Going on 50 days since the pivot low on September 13th. And interestingly enough, in both of our past alt seasons, Bitcoin dominance spiked up one last time into the month of December before dropping like a stone. That was December in 2017 and December 2020. So that's another thing for us to keep in mind for Q1 of 2026 leading into the next solar eclipse on February 16th. Now, I'd like us to shift over into something that I usually cover when the season is upon us, and that's Mercury retrograde, which I've been actively covering pretty much for the past 4 years here. And what seems to be the theme regarding Mercury retrograde is that the first Mercury retrograde of the year or the last Mercury retrograde of the calendar year tends to be bullish, whilst the ones that are quote unquote in between are more sideways, and they definitely have their bearish moments for sure. Also, regarding the first or last Mercury retrograde of the year, here you'll see it says Q4, here you'll see it says Q1, here you'll see it says Q4, Q1, Q4, just so you're aware. With me saying that the first and last Mercury retrogrades of the year and how they tend to be bullish, this does not mean that they both have to be bullish back to back. So if we have a Q4 Mercury retrograde pump in December, it doesn't mean to also expect a pump in the next Mercury retrograde that lands in March, for example. Don't expect back to back. But there are times where, for example, we have a Mercury retrograde landing at the very start of the year and it's bullish, and then all the way at the end of the year we have the one that is still within the same calendar year and it's bullish as well. So I hope that makes sense. To not expect back to back, but the Q1 and Q4 example that I just gave, where same calendar year, spread apart, that is very normal. And we even see in this example here, we have at the very start of 2023, and then we have here, we're even going higher, even though this wasn't, the craziest example, we still did push higher into the final Mercury retrograde of the year. Same thing over here in December. So we're going to look at this guide now, zoom in a little bit more, talking about this guide right here. I know it looks a little messy. It's just because I've overlaid like a lot of data from past cycles. We're not going to focus on that. We just want to focus on this, and we want to focus on the way these arrows are oriented. And this will be the time frame that Mercury is stationed retrograde, and this will be the shadow period. So I'm going to quickly review this. So we have a guide. This breaks down Mercury retrograde into 4 distinct phases. We have phase 1, which we're about to move into. It's the 4 to 7 days before Mercury stations retrograde. So you could consider this a shadow phase in the other direction. However you want to look at it, it doesn't really bother me. Then you have, starting at this red box, for the first week, the first 4 to 7 days, you have phase 2, which is typically a push up. And here you'll see that I have 2 arrows moving up, but it's usually like this. Let me get a drawing tool. Move up into the start of Mercury retrograde, have a quick correction, and then move up again. And then what happens here is a bull trap, except in the final Mercury retrograde of the year, or the first Mercury retrograde of the year. So this is why I added in this additional arrow. But the phases are pretty clear that we actually tend to end most Mercury retrogrades sideways. So the first day, daily close of Mercury retrograde is very similar to the last day. This actually even happened to us in the last Mercury retrograde, like within $1. And I told everyone this would happen before it happens. It's not like a flex. I'm just letting everyone know, because when it started getting bearish here, a lot of people didn't believe the theory that we would end sideways. And then out of nowhere, we did perfectly end sideways. And you'll see from the first day of Mercury retrograde to the last, same prices. So this is what happens most of the time. Now, right now, so this phase, by the way, from here to here, you could call that the middle if you would like. And then we have phase 4 over here. It would be the shadow phase. It's the 2 weeks following. So right now we're moving into phase 1. Then for next week's red pill on Sunday, November 9th, Mercury will actually be stationing retrograde. So we'll check in then to see how the price reacts to this energy for this week. But just so you're aware, even on the quote-unquote bullish iterations of Mercury retrograde, it's still very normal to see boring price action, and it's even very normal to see the 48 hours around Mercury stationing retrograde can be a correction into 48 hours before or 48 hours after. So that's why I said around, the 2 days before, 2 days after the very start of Mercury stationing retrograde. It's a very volatile time frame as it's stationing retrograde. And this will take us through the 5-day window of the following full moon on November 5th, because you'd have 5 days after the full moon would be November 10th. That would be the second day of Mercury retrograde in that quote-unquote 48-hour window specific to Mercury retrograde. So to keep it simple, this week ahead could have drama. And I think the energetics here with Mercury stationing retrograde next weekend, and we're heading into the final 3 weeks of Saturn retrograde, which is something I covered last year. It's this setup that we're moving into, which could have some boredom and uncertainty, boredom or uncertainty, I should say. And that's the environment that creates like what we call time capitulation, which is yet another trap, another tool used by the market makers. So keep that in mind. And I'll wrap up this Mercury retrograde analysis here, and we'll recap it next week and dive even deeper into that if needed in the next Red Pill podcast. But for now, let's pivot over into the more traditional technical analysis, quickly recap this recent 2-month candle closures that came in on the September monthly close, starting with the stock market, and then we'll check in on gold and then move over to the crypto market after. So we're going to just quickly look at the S&P 500. Going to check out these 2-month candles. I am going to turn this all off because I don't want any noise. And there we have it, guys. This is a legendary candle close, almost another 6% on the month. This is 3 clear green continuation candles in a row. This type of candle formation closing does not look problematic at all. The monthly candle even also very similar to the candle closure that we had in August. And again, there's nothing really showing a sign of this stopping unless, we start to get something new for the stock market, which we haven't really gotten. It's been mostly the same. It's feeling kind of like that, but in the opposite directions for altcoins in crypto. It's just been down, down, down. It's been more of the same. So there needs to be a change of character effectively. But from a technical perspective, this is just a continuation. We're on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 green candles. I mean, this has been an epic run since the C19 crash. I mean, damn. Imagine you're just getting in on the SPX the C19 crashed up 173%. There's some altcoins today that are actually lower than where they were trading at during the C19 crash. It's crazy. So just buying the basics could have been the solution here, especially for Bitcoin. If you look at the performance in the Bitcoin chart over time, it'll make your eyes cross. As Bitcoin's from the C19 crash in a similar level, it's literally up a 1,700% since. Does that not blow your mind? Anywho, getting back to this, we're going to see the same story on NASDAQ. We're going to see the same story on Dow. And this is worth commenting on for the Russell, because this will be a confirmed monthly candle closure at new all-time highs. And then the 2-month looks absurd. So this to me is wild, because we also have a candle body close over the wick of November 2-month candle, and this November, say it again with me, November 2021 2-month candle, which was a reversal candle. Also here was a reversal candle. November 2021, November 2024, and here we are moving into November of 2025. So the ending candle being November, December would not be weird here, but it also shows that it's kind of, the final hoorah, right? Even here we had the bull trap into November because the following crashed us into the C19 market. Anyways, this is a really fascinating setup, but let's look at the weekly, because the weekly we're starting to confirm this is a potential new support, but we've been getting a lot of chop here and not that full exuberant release that you'd want to see into price discovery. So this is very much like what ETH is dealing with. It's just not able to break out. It smacked against the ceiling of the prior all-time highs and then got rejected pretty hard. And then we all see how everything came down on October 10th. NASDAQ, on the other hand, massive gap on the weekly. S&P also gap on the weekly. Dow pretty much gap on the weekly. It's starting to get pretty unhealthy. So even though I said what I said earlier about this is a continuation pattern, this is pretty unhealthy still for the most part. How much higher can this go is the question. And the fact that it's doing this at the same time gold is doing what it's doing, which I want to quickly check in on now, that's concerning, because this really does have to just become an all crypto rally coming soon. Gold, I don't see how that has much more. And obviously the stock market, I don't see how that has much more. There has to be a rotation. Otherwise, this will be a very, very strange November ahead. Now, again, I'm kind of keeping the posture of, well, if it's been so disastrous lately and so negative, and it's been pretty much negative for most of the year for altcoins, I'm not sold on the fact that it's over just yet. And also when I look at Bitcoin dominance, I feel the same way. And also when you look at liquidity coming in, you should feel the same way too. Well, you shouldn't feel anything. Do you follow your own investment thesis, of course, but I mean, just isolating liquidity in and of itself, empty money supply, things are looking pretty good. But we are having the typical September, October kind of fake out weird vibes. Gold down also another week. We're already seeing a full 11% correction, and I've already talked about gold a couple times. Let me show you the chart that we will continue to keep track of. I believe it's here. Yes. So we'll continue to keep track of this. Again, it shows that we have chop, 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 but maybe the deepest part comes in sometime. Well, the first part of the deep correction comes in mid-February, which funny enough is in alignment with the next solar eclipse. And then we have an even deeper correction coming in with May. But still a couple of opportunities. You see this is like a weird inverse head and shoulders pattern. Couple of opportunities to de-risk even in January and also even in March. Now, I'm not saying it's going to go exactly the way that it did back over here. But just keep in mind that from this move over here down to this move over here was the entire alt season move. When Bitcoin started pretty much breaking out from 15K. It's like 15K to 70K almost was this whole move for Bitcoin. Literally. While gold gave up 19%, Bitcoin went from around 15K to 66K, I think. I know it went up one more time into Q4, but the point is that was a crazy rotation. And that was also where the alt season happened. So we'll track this once there's something new to talk about. Let's move over into the Bitcoin chart, just check in on this this bi-monthly close. A little bit of weakness over here in Bitcoin as I'm filming. Let me go over into the first chart. So from a bi-monthly closure perspective, this is clearly signs of struggle. Okay? This is obvious. It was a green candle though, 1%. This is pretty crazy to think 2-month candles, and Bitcoin's usually one of the better performing assets. So we have a 1% closure and then followed by another 1% closure. This is indecision. This is like what happens? What do we do? And fucked up thing is this also happened over here leading into November, which ended up being a major bottom. So, very tough call on Bitcoin in regards to that, but that was a pivot low for Bitcoin in November of 2022 with a very similar structure, just indecision leading into that. Obviously, it's already had quite a correction. Here we're at top. So, this is also something kind of like this. We reached a major inflection point, 2 indecision candles in a row. I've called them dojis, and then we popped up and then continued. I mean, this is pretty deep out, but it's showing you that like we're in that mode. We're like, how many months now has Bitcoin been trapped in this area? Well, technically, let's look. 1, 2, let's call it back to November of 2024. That's a full year that we've hit like 100K effectively and just been continuing to struggle going much higher. And clearly the support has been in our favor though for Bitcoin. Let's look at the weekly. Again, indecision. We're just seeing everything we gave up the week prior. We got it back last week and now we're giving it back again. Indecision. Bulls and bears are both doing whatever with each other. So yeah, this is clear signs that the market wants to pick a direction, and that's a very tough time to be in markets. That's where retail definitely starts getting very scared, and that's where analysts start to get very emotional even themselves. No offense, I'm not throwing any shots here. I'm just saying when you're in this type of market, you either have time capitulation or you have just people getting anxious of what direction are we going to go in. And that was effectively kind of all of our pivots were like that, especially for Bitcoin. And the alts definitely follow suit. So what I'm seeing though when I zoom out is we have these 2 major tops over here, which by the way, when Bitcoin was doing this, everyone was calling for that it was these 2 tops, like this type of double top. Again, a lot of people were like, okay, well, we've done it already. And then Bitcoin fully recovered, just like, what is that, 8 green candles in a row, hit a new all-time high. Then it's still been higher since. So this is a very elusive asset to be calling for repeats of the same thing. And the only thing that I'm seeing that is similar in this run is a more extended and like less chaotic 2016 rally, where it's just been perpetual 20 to 30% corrections along the way. And it's just a little bit more extensive because instead of them wrapping up in like a week or two, they're taking months. Okay. And that's clear. So let's look at where the 55 weekly is. I'm sure a lot of people are looking at that because that was a touch point back in August new moon flash crash of 2024 and also a touch point in the April 7th tariff crash. And now we're seeing the 55 simple moving average has gotten up to $100,000. So it's at a very, very important psychological level as well. And even with the recent liquidation event and the push lower, about a week later, we haven't seen Bitcoin come back to 100K. So it's interesting if the market maker's playing with everyone right now, making bears think that we have to go below 100 or we have to tap on 100 just for whatever reason. And it might be enough already. It might be enough blood, enough boredom. And this is what the market maker is playing with right now. They're never going to put things to perfect levels, is what I'm trying to say. So another thing, obviously, is if we lose the 55, then we can pretty much confirm that we're going to get something like this occurring where we would drop below it and then come back up to it. And the thing is will it end kind of like with a Bitcoin dominant spillover, similar to what happened at the end of this cycle, where we had that all occur over here pretty rapidly? Or is it actually just this pull up into the 55 and then we enter this dreaded bear market, which is what happened over here too. We broke below the 55, we came back to it and got rejected and pulled down. The only reason I'm saying that it could be a pull below the 55 and then things are still okay is because the fact that Bitcoin's been just perpetually dominant this whole time. So it's at this point now where there's not enough people playing with it specifically like with leverage, and there's mostly retail out of Bitcoin. That was pretty much the case since the last cycle. So I'll wrap up this Bitcoin analysis here. We're definitely chopped and sideways, and it's very tough to be making any conclusive calls when you see a market like this. The same thing on Ethereum. We're going to quickly tap on quickly check out the Ethereum chart. We could see 3 tops over here. We've hyperextended above it. We've come to back test it. And again, it's just sort of indecision. And the same way Ethereum has been every time it's trading around $4,000. It just doesn't know what to do. Can I go higher or not? And it's been continuously dealing with that going all the way back to November of 2021. We can see the move that it made in May of 2021, followed by a major rejection. And here we have the same into this V-shaped recovery that we had. So 55 on the weekly here sits at around $3,000. And you can see what ended the run over here is something that it feels like we did over here. Indicator-wise, having the 8 cross below the 55 and then this bull trap where you get bought back up and have like what we would call a dead cat bounce. We never really had that here. We just had a perpetual sell-off. And then exactly bought right back to the same price. This is a lot of manipulation. This is not like the typical way that things end. Over here, you can see the way it ended was we hyperextended over the 55. We came back to it and bounced. And then when we had the cross, the 55, or the 8 below the 55, that was lights out. 8 below the 55 lights out. But here in this cycle, we've had the 8 below the 55 twice, and we've just been continuing to chop. So it's getting more and more extended feeling. And the indicators are showing me that as well, even these lagging indicators. Let's go over to XRP. Kind of the same story as last week. There's not a whole lot to talk about because we've been pretty much stuck in the same area since the liquidation day. And then if we zoom out to where we're at compared to when the breakout, hit peak euphoria for XRP, it's been almost a full year now since we've hit this $2.50 range. So one thing that's really positive about this is anybody who bought in the prior range, you're really in profits anywhere that you bought in the bear market leading up to November. Question is do we have a similar repeat of the way this turned around in the month of November? Well, one thing that's different here is we've broken out of this channel. There's a couple other things that I had that were interesting. One, we know the major support is around $2, so holding $2 is good. And then we have over here, I took this whole move from effectively, what do we call it, June through November. And this fractal, for the most part, has been playing out, but it's not specifically playing out. So we're going to have to see. I think this upcoming Mercury retrograde will definitely set the tone for how things are going to go because, again, that was really surprising what happened last year, how we just hit that November inflection point and then everything went up. So also the year before that, without an election. So I should have said that actually, because I know some people might say, well, oh, it's because of the election, but it's like, well, we did the same thing the year before, literally. So all of that. This is the start of November right here for Doge, and this is it extending over into March. So a lot of alts did very well back then. Alrighty, so let me move on to Injective. Oh, it's been some time since I've looked at this particular project. I don't love this because in Wyckoff, this is a UTAD, a thrust after distribution. When you get this move that kind of extends above into new highs, and then you come back to the golden pocket, but then you make a lower high, and then you start concretely trading below the prior peak that you thought you broke out from, and then this breakdown right here, pretty rough. So what I would like to see on this injective chart is this golden pocket level of around $8, or let's call it 7 to 8. I would definitely like to see that hold for this to not have another slide down. Just so you're aware, this was April 2021, this was November 2021, and this was where we were at in late October into November of 2020. So the market was, I mean, of course, this launched at that time, but the market was really down at that time. And then it was right there at that transition point when we were heading into November that we saw all the alts go crazy. So again, like just keep that in mind. A couple of things I want to look for though is this. Yeah, so this wick that we had almost hit the 1618 on the downside. And this tells me like, is this wick gonna be filled for the bear market for everything? You know, like that's one thing that's really interesting is like how everything collapsed all at the same time, even when retail wasn't allowed access to the exchanges, and then it was all perfectly bought up from there. So it's interesting how this is when I pull these reverse fibs, like what levels I end up seeing again. I wonder if this is around the 236 fib. Yeah, like it's super close. So you see what I did there? I just pulled a generic fib from the swing high to the swing low, and the 236 is right there, pretty much kissing this 1618 in the opposite direction. So that's a very typical level for like really fucked up bear markets after you have price discovery. Like as you can see, that would be a 95% correction, which is not weird for crypto. Crypto always has at least 95% corrections for most altcoins. This is even Solana had a 95% correction in the last cycle. So this plane needs to pull up soon, you know, because if this is just one of your pivots after having some blood in the streets, then fine. Here we have this 2022 pivot. It's really interesting because I haven't spent so much time investigating what does the solar or lunar cycle do for independent cryptos. And it's tough for me too because a lot of altcoins just don't have enough chart history. You know what I'm saying? So it was always easier to just look everything from the perspective of Bitcoin. Even in ETH, you're not given too much chart history, so it's tough. On certain projects like Doge, you have like multiple cycles to look back at. But you look at stuff like this injective and it only goes back to 2020. So you can't really be formulating many theories around that limited chart history, right? But the more and more that we're like down in the dumps heading into this time of the year, it's making me feel really reminiscent of like what Bitcoin used to do, where Bitcoin would just have these major moves up and then 1 year after it would look like the bottom, right? So I'm not saying that's necessarily exactly the case this time around, but like it does feel that way for certain altcoins, you know? So I'm going to continue to meditate on that more and share my thoughts as we go. But for now, this particular project Injective is pretty much right there at a level where it was a make or break into the last bear market. So obviously we've come back to it in April 2025. Here is your topping structure that you had in late 2023 into the pretty much Q1 2024, and it's been some time since. Like this has been some time since we've had this particular project looking good. Funny enough, 666 days, but this is sort of that make or break territory. So what would be best is if this holds as a support naturally. Could it be something like this? And then again, it's pretty clear that you have this. And what happens is in some of these cases is you could either have a kickback in either direction, like you saw here, where it was like, I know it doesn't look like much, but that was about a month and a couple weeks of holding this support level. Then it came back to this level again for about a month before breaking below it. And then it was a kickback effect where it actually had this slingshot and went the opposite, right? That is also in the cards here for this particular level because I'm seeing it pop up several times in this chart here. And then we'll move on. But you have here this level and then again. So keep an eye on that for Injective. This like $6 level to 7. It's a really make or break. But kickbacks tend to happen in both directions. So you could have something like this. Like a very fucking weird structure. And I know something like that looks absurd, right? Like you're like, how? Well, look at this. You can have this type of structure with a higher high. It's not weird. It's not. I know it looks crazy, but this is crypto, man. So here you had a fucking 80% correction in 10 days, and then it got bought back up 200%. So I know this stuff looks weird, but it's just not with crypto. And you guys all saw recently how we could have Bitcoin have a 10% correction and every single altcoin has a 50% correction at the same time. So this injective chart is definitely very interesting because it's had this higher high, which looks like a Wyckoff upthrust after distribution, but it hasn't quite dug its way into the depths of its last bear market, which was everything below this $6.50 territory. And even then, it didn't spend too much time below there. We only have 180 days of injective trading around the dollar. And then right now, if you bought that dollar, $2 injective, it's really solid play. I mean, damn, even if you got out around the last all-time high, that's 1,000 fucking percent. So this isn't the worst chart I've seen for sure. And what would be hopeful here is just a higher low in the macro. We're not going to spend as much time on all the other charts, but I'm just I always like to start off the first one with, yeah, like look at this, man. Whoa, Axelar just absolutely destroyed. So the October 10th event really wiped this one out. All of this prior stuff that I was doing on this chart was just kind of, I assume at the time, showing an example of major levels to keep in mind. And this is really the only one that counts right here. So let me change the color of this. Make it orange or something, yellow. And for me, these two are fine, and I'll get rid of that. Now, what the hell? Look at this shit. So when I pull the reverse fib pretty much from the breakdown level to where this liquidity event occurred, it's almost perfect at the golden ratio. So again, this feels like kind of like just all algos pushing everything down at the same time to do the same stuff. But this completely broke structure and it's in price discovery to the downside. So there's no bottom on this but zero. I'm not saying Axelar is going to zero, but just so you're aware, like this is the kind of thing we're faced with where we've broken away from any other prior price actions. There's no volume in this area. One thing I could do is I can mark off this pivot right here. And you can see that like when the quote unquote bull run was over, it came down to this exact level and then it really chopped around here quite a bit before that decision was made. And then obviously it's been down since. This is a 50% move. This would obviously be one of those, if you were invested in it and you're really, really down and you can't afford to not have money right now, like consider taking the loss. But usually in these situations, if you can deal with it, then just hold, because these are what would be called a spring in Wyckoff on this particular chart. And a spring looks like this, where you have a major upside move followed by what would be considered perhaps a selling climax. And then after your selling climax, you have an automatic rally followed by a deeper, much more devastating correction, typically tied to a narrative. So in the C19 crash in 2020, that was the spring for the Bitcoin chart. Let me quickly show you. So you have here buying climax, selling climax, automatic rally, spring, test. This could very well be this. And it feels like shit. It feels horrible. It feels like, why would I touch this garbage? But then you see that like these are the only times to actually make crazy amounts of money anymore in crypto, besides getting early on a meme coin, and selling it at the perfect time, which in some of these meme coins, it's only like a couple of minutes after they launch, and then it's all over. So yeah, this is obviously not the most pretty chart. I personally don't hold any Axelar, but I'm sure I'm in one of these projects that looks like this. Something on October 10th that just got wiped out, and I have like 30 different altcoin positions, so it's hard to even keep up with them. Let's move over to Harmony One. This is an OG project. This is one that I actually did hold a little bit of at the time. I sold it in the last bull run and I haven't returned back to it, but it was definitely in the camp of all the hype and euphoria that were narrative based in the crypto conversation back then. So I believe this was like an NFT marketplace. I might be wrong. Who cares? But yeah, we can see that October 10th took this one out too, because now it broke a structure that was lasting for over 1,000 days as a support, and it kept coming back to as a support, making higher highs and holding, and then effectively this was the nail in the coffin. But funny enough, we also had this same area we were trading in back at the end of 2020 before this thing broke out in an absolute straight fucking line. So you see, this is your C19 crash. This was tied to like your narrative. And then obviously our recovery is not the same, but just think about that. Like the fact that it needed to come all the way back to almost the same exact level, and the way that it all happened, I mean, to me, just think about the timing, and that could be like sort of what we're up here against, particularly with altcoins, where we didn't see the next peak 154 days after that bottom. Oh, that's funny. That brings us into early March. This was March 2024. This was March 2021. We did come up a little bit higher though into Q4. And obviously this was your low in March 2020. Very, very fascinating chart. I don't have a whole lot to say about this. I will just say that this is kind of at a point now where everyone who's invested in it is probably in a loss. Apply the same thing that I said prior. Of course, not financial advice, but if you're really, really down on this thing and you absolutely need the money and you feel like it's just a horrible investment, it's a loser, you have to make that call. Like, do you want to keep being in something that bleeds out more and more? Or if it's already been such a loss and you don't really need the money, might as well hold, because in this type of environment, it's a very quick thing that occurs that brings things back to where they were once. So you have resistance, you have launch, you have resistance, and you have resistance. And from where we are now, I mean, of course, if you were buying like the best of the best here, you might get 230% on the best move possible. But hey, it's better than fucking being down. All right. So the name of the game here is always buy the blood. I wouldn't buy right now, though, personally. I am not confident in these types of charts. I've already said my piece on this weeks ago. Now we're moving over to Pyth Network, which is super limited chart history. We have a top over here in March 2024. We are here 600 days later. It's just perpetually down as well. We can see 90% down from peak. We had June quite low. We had August, big move up, and then we've given back all the gains. But the thing is that at least we're holding. Unlike the last chart, we actually broke significantly lower. So here we're just holding at a level that seems to be wanting to be a support. Now, I believe these wicks, actually. I'm starting to, the more and more charts that I look at, because I just have so many examples now over the past almost month since that liquidation event. And I like the 236, 1 second, let me just get this strong. I like the 236 hold here. And I do suspect this level is going to be an asshole. So, yeah, pardon my French or whatever they say, but this level is support that broke, and then you can see it right there on that liquidity injection back up to it, that it was a GTFO moment because we came down even lower. So if you're invested in Pyth, look out for this 25-cent area, because if you invested anything below that, there's nothing wrong with doing a little de-risking, especially if you're talking about a double. And don't have the craziest high expectations that this thing is going to like be breaking above the 786 or something like that. You know, like you really have to be on that mode where you're more conservative right now just because of the state of the economy. Unless the Fed comes out and starts saying they're going to print money to oblivion again. And then, of course, you can get very excited. But quantitative tightening is wrapping up, as I believe is the last, piece of information that I received. And as for QE, though, we don't know. But yeah, just keep an eye out for that level particularly, because that's clearly a level of importance. And the good news here is if we could break through that, we have a clean move to about 50 cents. So from where we are right now, there's a potential of getting about a 300% move. I wouldn't buy this chart right now. Again, I'm trying to hold off on charts that look like this. Very, very new projects, unless, again, you've done your own research, you're aware of what's going on, and you can make decisions based on your own personal investment thesis, which means don't just go finding YouTube videos where somebody sells you on this bullshit that this is the next 10x coin. Avoid that stuff. Eventually they'll be right, though. Obviously, if you give people 100 projects to look at, they'll be winners. Now we're moving on to a cash network. Okay, very interesting chart. So we had a clean parallel channel that was in play. This is kind of reminiscent of Aerodrome, right? Aerodrome had this long, arduous parallel channel, and then it broke out of it. This case to the downside. This case to the upside. Very interesting how it like formed at almost the same timing too. Okay, anyways, so this is March 2021. So this is a project that was here in the last cycle. This is November 2020, by the way. Very interesting how November 2020, everything looked much different 2 or 3 months later, But this was just straight green candles all the way until fucking April 2021. It would be great if that was the same here. Yeah, okay. Also, February 2024 coming back up to a double top. That's very interesting. The fact that we've now given up all of that and we've come back to levels that, pretty much at the halfway point is very interesting. Okay. So obviously 382, not the most critical or important level after you've already gotten rejected and broke down below the golden pocket, typically these things want to come to the 236. So kind of a tough call here on this Akash because it has double topped, which to me is enough. And you guys know what I teach you, and now we're seeing it a lot more than we're not, okay? One of the number one things that I teach, whenever you see me look at a coin, don't I normally tell you anything around the golden pocket to the 888 is like good enough in my opinion? Okay. Now, if you were to have bought a cash here and you got out at the 888, you made 2,200%. So even though I don't personally hold it, this is the type of stuff that I'm saying week after week after week with regards to the TA. Not to expect price discovery on everything. Okay. Because if you expected price discovery on this, you would have never gotten out and you'd probably be mad at yourself right now and you might only be breaking even. You might even be at a loss. So the point here is that like everybody has a different investment thesis. Everybody's learning about certain projects at certain times. And hopefully like what we're experiencing right now is the very end of a very dramatic and like lousy, you know, kind of like mini bear market within the bull run sort of deal for altcoins. But hopefully when we recover, you take this stuff seriously, and I will be taking it seriously myself. I've told you so many times on so many projects that I personally hold, I'm getting out around the 786 to 888, especially when it's 1,000% or more to get there, you know? And for example, there's a couple of projects that I'm in that I know are really down. Filecoin is a great example. Look, broke below, and now it's in that like weird no man's land vibe. And if this were to return back to which I don't think it will, but I'm just saying, if this were to return back to the golden pocket, I'd be an idiot to not take profit in that region. It's 3,000% from here. From where I was getting in, I mean, it's clearly not as good, but still, that's an amazing move. So why, when I look at these charts, I rarely entertain them going past prior all-time highs is because we're not in that same market anymore. And the fact that I brought up this concept of getting out around the golden pocket or up to the 888 fib for a lot of these speculative altcoins, and we've seen so many of them hit those points and turn over, or if they do hit double top, it's like a week of time or less. It's me trying to teach you that this is an important area to not be greedy still. You've already made it to greed. Get out. So I think these are things that are going to be really important moving forward. I could see a lot of recoveries in certain random coins right now. And just be careful, guys. Like, this is a very emotional time. This is a time where I get it. Like, there's a lot of money on the table for a lot of people, and they just don't have solid investment theses built clearly. And that's why they're getting so emotional. That's what they're getting shaken out. So we're here. I'm going to wrap this up looking at this particular chart because we have the prior double top of 2021. And then we also have a trend line support that's been in place since November 2023. So we have November 2023, we have November 2024, and then here we are this year. Right here at this point where, as you can see, two rejections into a bear market, and we've now come above that level with the tariff crash in the midst of it. Lots of time around this red trend line again, and then also as of late. To me, this is kind of feeling like this grind up over here after having a little bit of a distributional top in the micro. And we're ready to have a sentiment shift soon. And given the fact that we're seeing these 47 codes align for this upcoming week, and we know that Bitcoin has a history of topping around the new moon of November or December, we're in that pivotal month. So we have gold giving up some of its gains. That's typically the time where Bitcoin starts to pick back up again. This feels like it's all sort of aligning at this very moment. So let's do our best to stay neutral. I'm going to wrap this one up here. I will, of course, be sharing a midweek market update as needed. Until then, I appreciate and I'm grateful for every single one of you. And I'm wishing you all an amazing rest of your weekend in the Matrix. Much love.